this, of course, if she had dressed like a woman and acted like a woman even when she was in public, perhaps people would have been more sympathetic to the idea of female preachers. Male dominance remained entrenched even though 2/3 of the adult members of a church were women. The men controlled the churches. All right, in 1820, there came another issue. By 1820, there were an equal number of free states and equal number of slave states. In 1820, Missouri asked to come into the Union as a slave state. Well, Missouri was not allowed in because the Congress felt like if Missouri is taken in, there'll be more slave states in the Senate than there are free. Now, of course, the House of Representatives, the North already greatly outnumbered the South. So in the House of Representatives, the House was overwhelmingly anti-slave, but the Senate was divided evenly. So anyway, Missouri did not get to come into the Union. But then about the same time, the state of Maine, which had been part of Massachusetts, broke away from Massachusetts and became its own state. Well, Henry Clay here saw a chance at compromise. Henry Clay said, hey, now wait a minute, why don't we take both states in? Maine wants to come in as a free state, and Missouri wants to come in as a slave state. We'll take them both in, and there'll still be an equal number of slave and free. This worked. In 1820, Missouri came into the Union. It was the first state, I believe that's right, west of the Mississippi River. Missouri is west of the river. And Maine came into the Union, having broken away from Massachusetts. Maine came in as a free state. Let's see. This is called the Missouri Compromise. There were to be three compromises that Henry Clay worked up. The Compromise of 1820, another Compromise of 1832, and finally the Compromise of 1850. By 1850, both Clay and Calhoun were very, very old men. Clay was able to stand up and talk to the Senate. Calhoun had to sit in a chair while one of his servants read his speech in front of the Senate. He was too weak to even stand up. But that's jumping ahead of the story a little bit. But Calhoun was a South Carolinian and very strongly pro-slave. Henry Clay was a Kentuckian whose relatives had owned slaves. Henry Clay did not believe in slavery himself. And anyway, the compromise.
So was the Missouri Compromise what brought in Maine?
It brought in both states, Maine and Missouri, into the Union.
Right.
And if you look, notice they both came in about the same time.
Also in 1820, right?
What's that? Either 1820 or 1821. They were close together. It might have been 1821 for Maine. I'm not sure. They were not taken in on the same day, but they took the one in with the understanding the other one would be taken in, which it was. It was part of an agreement that they worked out, compromise. Henry Clay's first of three main compromises. Hopefully, you all know what a compromise is where if you can't agree on something, each side gives in a little bit. It works under certain conditions. But under certain conditions, there are some people you cannot compromise with. And eventually what happened was the United States reached a point where the issue of slavery could not be compromised on. But I'm not going to knock Henry Clay for compromising here. The compromises might have worked had it not been for the Supreme Court, which we'll talk about later. All right. Again, a lot of girls started going to school. Particularly, let's see, where do I have it here on my notes?
Female education.
I'm looking at page 251. That a lot of girls, in fact, eventually started going to college. Teaching, it was found out that teachers, elementary school teachers of young kids, first, second, third, and fourth grade, generally women do better than men do in those grades. And a lot of times, to this day, teachers of the lower grades are female. All right, now, in the meantime, Spain became involved in the war against Napoleon. Well, while Spain was involved, the countries in Latin America got together among themselves and said, let's rebel against Spain and let's do like the United States did and become independent. So one after another, now the islands like Cuba and Puerto Rico, they could not because they had no place to run and hide. But Mexico got its independence in 1820. Mexico became independent of Spain. Then a man named Simon Bolivar got Bolivia and Colombia and Ecuador and Peru, those countries independent. And then a man named San Martin got Chile and Argentina independent. One after another, the countries in the South American mainland got their independence. Well, when the war was over, Spain asked for help from the other European countries. Please help us get these countries back. The British Navy said, if you do, we'll fight you. But James Monroe said, if you do, we'll fight you. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine simply stated that the United States would, I promised you that the United States would not fight in Europe's wars. This was broken in the 20th century. And if any nation from Europe came to fight against us, it would be a hostile act against the United States. The United States would defend the Western Hemisphere nations against European intervention. Now, the Monroe Doctrine really did not scare Europeans off. What really did probably was the British Navy. But between Britain and the United States, the other European nations stayed out, and Spain never got its colonies back. All right. Now, after James Madison had served 2 terms, there was by this time a popular prejudice that presidents should not serve more than 2 terms. Today this is a law. Washington only served 2 terms, retired. Jefferson served 2 terms, retired. Madison served 2 terms and retired. John Quincy Adams, actually 4 candidates entered the race. There was John Quincy Adams, and in addition, there was actually 5. There were Crawford, Clay, Calhoun, and Jackson. 5 candidates, in addition to Adams, who won. Now, Jackson became really popular after winning the Battle of New Orleans, but Jackson had some serious issues in his personal life. Number 1, he was a dueler. Number 2, he was partly educated. Number 3, the other issue was his wife. No one knows exactly what happened, but what we do know, here's the facts. Andrew Jackson's wife, Rachel, had been married to a man. This man had been in a war and he'd become shell-shocked, apparently, and he was extremely cruel. And Rachel had left him and gone back to her parents' home. And in those days, a man who was walking along from one place to another would knock on the door late at night and ask if he could find shelter. May I stay at your house tonight? There were no hotels. And the American colonies would actually open up and let them in. Where a lot of homes would have a room attached to the house that was always unlocked, and anybody who wanted to come in could just come in and bed down for the night. Well, Jackson knocked on the door one day of a house, and Rachel answered. It was love at first sight. But the problem was Rachel did not have a divorce from her first husband. So Jackson, being a justice of the peace himself, among his other titles, he went to the justice of the peace nearby and asked if this justice of the peace could give Rachel a divorce. And here's where the story becomes muddy. We know that Jackson asked for a divorce. Somehow or another, the divorce, the paperwork did not come through, or when the paperwork finally came through, it had a post-date. It did not have the original date on it, but was dated after Jackson and Rachel were married. Which meant that Jackson and Rachel, actually unknowing to each other, were married before that she actually had a divorce. Divorce had recently been made legal, and of course there was not a hard, fast rule about what constituted divorce. From that day till the day she died, Rachel was slandered. She was called an adulteress and everything else. Jackson fought 2 duels over the issue, but the last man he dueled got his shot off and put a lead ball inside Jackson's abdomen, which in those days could not be taken out, and Jackson was to suffer from lead poisoning the rest of his life. Jackson obviously never dueled after that. But he killed the man, by the way. I mean, the man got his shot off and hit Jackson in the abdomen and permanently left a bullet in Jackson. But Jackson got his shot off and killed the man. Again, later Jackson was to challenge Henry Clay to a duel, and Henry Clay said, I don't believe in that, I'm not going to do it. And that's encouraged other people to stand up firm and say, no, I don't duel. Henry Clay refused to duel him. But anyway, Jackson had these problems. Well, what actually happened was John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, won the election. And as soon as John Quincy Adams had won the election, Henry Clay was made Secretary of State. Well, folk, this is nothing more than Washington politics. Actually, what happened was Henry Clay and Jackson possibly made an agreement where that Henry Clay was told by Adams, if you'll support me, I mean, Adams probably said to Henry Clay, if you'll support me, I'll make you Secretary of State. This was done very recently, folk, when Barack Obama agreed with Hillary Clinton that if Hillary Clinton would support Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton would become Secretary of State. In Washington politics, this is not looked on as being in any way corrupt. This is simply the way Washington politics is run. Now, if any of you were to come to me and tell me, hey, I'll give you $50 if you'll raise my grade by 10 points, that would be wrong. But congressmen will oftentimes, well, it's called log roll. You know, you have a bill up that you want passed, and I will support your bill if you will support mine. This is standard congressional procedure. Nothing wrong with it, except for one thing. When the election was over, Andrew Jackson raised the holler, there was a corrupt bargain between these two men, and they whipped me out by a corrupt bargain between the two of them. And they really put up the pressure, and they made John Quincy Adams 4 years miserable. Now, of course, John Quincy Adams had a lot of dreams that he couldn't fulfill. For instance, he was interested in astronomy. He wanted to build a national telescope right there in Washington. Congress wouldn't pass it. He got up other bills to establish national industries, which Congress wouldn't pass. Some of his own cabinet were hostile to him, and he wouldn't fire them, which every president has the right to do, but he wouldn't dismiss them. All told, I mean, John Quincy Adams was not a politician. And Jackson and his men waited for 4 years noisily for the election of 1828, in which they believed Jackson would win. All right. With that, I'm trying to make this easier for myself. We'll start the next.